Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today is on one of the most frustrating obstacles that language learners face, this kind of invisible barrier that stands between just passively understanding and, active fluent speech. We've all seen it. The learner who can ace a grammar test has a huge vocabulary, but just can't find that cognitive flow when they actually need to speak. They know English, but they can't seem to think in it.
Right, and that inability, as our source material really gets into, it stems from this incredibly costly habit of mental translation. When a person hears something or wants to say something, all of that information gets filtered through their mother tongue first. And that just creates this cognitive overload, it spikes their anxiety, and it leads to what the material calls the inevitable thinking speed problem. They're not slow speakers, they're just burdened by a two-step process.
Exactly. And the central question we have to wrestle with today is really about intervention. It's about sequencing. What is the most effective and necessary prerequisite for shifting the brain to think directly in English? Is it adopting these specialized active output techniques, these structural methods designed to force speed? Or is it more about cultivating a fundamental psychological mindset shift around correctness and making mistakes? I'll be arguing for the primacy of these structured, active techniques. I believe we have to act our way into a new way of thinking.
And I'm going to take a fundamentally different view. I believe that overcoming those really deep-seated internal obstacles, the psychological traps of fear and perfectionism, well, that's the essential foundational work that you just have to do first. I mean, until the mind is liberated from this need for perfection, no technique, no matter how clever, is going to work effectively.
My position really rests on the fact that fluency is a performance skill. And the path to achieving it is, it's paved by very specific targeted active use that directly addresses that mechanical slowdown from translation. We have to force the brain to transition from seeing English as just abstract knowledge to English as a demonstrable high-speed skill. The brain needs deliberate structural reprogramming that converts all that passive knowledge into immediate automatic output. We have to embrace this mantra, conversation over study. And what that means is we actively create the moment of speaking, even when it feels uncomfortable. So consider chunk learning. This isn't just memorizing vocabulary, it's absorbing entire phrases, idioms, and grammatical structures as single units of meaning. If I learn the phrase, say, "it looks like rain," as one chunk, my brain doesn't sit there and translate, "it looks like rain." No, it accesses the whole concept instantly. This structurally bypasses that single word translation step. It cuts the latency and you get speed. We have to embrace this mantra. Another essential technique is shadowing. This method, where you're simultaneously repeating what you hear, it trains the physical side, pronunciation and rhythm. But more importantly, it trains your thinking speed instantly. Why? Because it completely removes the planning and hesitation stage. The brain is forced into a real-time echo, activating the production center without giving you time for all that mental translation and self-correction. Fluency is ultimately achieved by consistently forcing output, because speaking before ready is what creates the readiness in the first place. It's disciplined, active skill building.
Okay, I absolutely agree that chunking and shadowing are powerful tools, I really do. But I challenge the idea that they're the primary prerequisite. They're trying to fix a symptom, which is slow speech, when the underlying disease is really conceptual and psychological. We're dealing with something far more rooted than just a simple habit. The source material highlights the mother tongue trap. And look, this isn't just translation, it's this cognitive interference where our deeply engraved native grammar and conceptual rules are actively hijacking the new language system. A learner doesn't just translate, they apply their native syntax to English, and that results in errors that just feed their own anxiety loop. If a learner is paralyzed by this belief that they have to speak perfectly, they can't and they won't even attempt your high-speed techniques. It just renders them useless. They'll stay in their silent period.
The biggest hurdles here are the fear of making mistakes and this crippling perfectionism. So the core solution, therefore, has to be the conceptual acceptance of imperfection. We have to prioritize communication, just getting the meaning across,
over perfect technical correctness. Fluency only begins when someone adopts a mistake-friendly mindset, viewing errors not as a failure but as, tangible proof of learning. And that requires deep mental reprogramming, a conceptual shift that gives the mind permission to be imperfect. Until the learner internally grants themselves this license to fail, their mouth will stay closed no matter how many chunks they've memorized.
I appreciate the depth of that diagnosis, I do, but I disagree with the sequencing. I see why you emphasize fear, but let's look again at the mechanical problem. If we reduce the mechanical slowness of it all, the practical success of rapid output can actually overcome the fear indirectly. Chunk learning is so effective precisely because it provides a structural solution. It's like a neural bypass that makes translation less necessary. If I can deliver a full, functioning sentence unit instantly, the anxiety that's associated with constructing the sentence it evaporates. We should be focusing intensely on concrete methods for reducing mental translation, like consciously practicing thinking in images, not words. When you want to say the dog is running, you shouldn't see the English words or the words in your native language. You should just see the image of the action. This technique forces a direct link between the concept and the English sound, completely bypassing that native language intermediary. The mechanical speed problem gets fixed by specialized training, and when the speech gets faster and smoother, that psychological barrier just naturally weakens.
I understand the appeal of the quick fix, of the structural shortcut, but thinking in images and reducing translation, isn't that the outcome of the mental shift, not the tool you use to start it? You're describing a fluent cognitive state, but how do we get liberated from the starting point, which is often so deeply academic? The barrier isn't just speed, it's that so many of us learn English from textbooks, which creates this artificial intellectual distance between thinking and speaking. Learners are burdened by grammar obsession. They internalize this belief that every single sentence must be a perfect textbook example. So they spend those critical milliseconds internally running a checklist. Is that the right preposition? Did I conjugate that passive tense correctly? That internal checking mechanism is the true bottleneck, and it has to be psychologically abandoned first. We have to focus on accepting imperfection as the necessary prerequisite. If a technique like shadowing forces them to speak faster, but their core anxiety about grammar is still there, they just panic faster. It cements the failure rather than helping them find flow. So tell me, if a student has perfect grammar knowledge but is paralyzed by fear, how does forcing them to speak faster actually address the fear itself?
It addresses the fear by demonstrating competence. And competence is the most powerful antidote to anxiety. But okay, let's address your point on grammar and that conceptual paralysis by bringing in another strategy, thinking time strategies. We teach the learner that pauses are normal. Using fillers like well, or or let me think, provides a measurable technique to manage that hesitation without falling back into their native language. It gives the learner a tool to buy critical milliseconds of planning time, keeping the conversation flowing in English while, reducing the visible signs of panic. It's a behavioral modification that leads to confidence.
That's a fascinating behavioral approach, but I question its foundation. A thinking time strategy is still a crutch, isn't it? It addresses the pause, but it doesn't address the reason for the pause, which is that frantic internal search for the correct grammatical structure. Furthermore, this brings us right to the necessity of input. I believe that without massive, deliberate listening, speaking becomes forced, unnatural, and structurally unsound. Listening isn't just about comprehension. It is the absolute foundation of thinking in English. It provides the context, the idiomatic patterns, the natural cadence for the brain to finally accept English as a thinking language. It builds that subconscious capacity for automatic responses through consistent, immersive exposure to native thought patterns. I mean, if your brain hasn't deeply internalized the sound and structure of fluent thought, how can you possibly expect it to generate it fluently? Listening is the mental fuel tank that allows those chunks you mentioned to be accessed naturally.
Input is absolutely the fuel. I won't dispute that for a second. But fluency is a skill developed through active use and output, not just passive reception. The source of our disagreement is the silent period, where a learner has this vast passive knowledge, but their production mechanism is just dormant. If the only prerequisite were listening, many learners would never, ever achieve fluency. You have to force gentle output to break it. We have to actively create those opportunities, even if they feel artificial at first. This means integrating methods like self-talk in English. It's a safe, low-pressure environment for mental rehearsal. Commenting on daily tasks, planning your day, describing what you see. And crucially, we also have to create immersion at home, changing your phone language, consuming only English media, reading English news headlines. This starts to treat English as a tool for daily life, not just a subject to be studied.
If you only listen, you only train your comprehension. You have to activate the output switch to get production flow. The only path to thinking faster is by practicing speaking faster. I see why you lean so heavily on forcing output, because of course skill development requires practice. But the self-talk strategy, well, it's excellent. It only works if the learner has already given themselves that essential psychological permission to produce what they know is going to be broken English. If their internal critic is too strong, self-talk just becomes another platform for self-flagellation over mistakes. My argument is that the internal liberation has to come before the effective use of these tools. Consider the issue of the accent. Your techniques might improve rhythm, but if the learner still believes that they have to sound native to be fluent, that pursuit of an impossible technical ideal will constantly hinder their flow. True, lasting confidence comes from adopting a long-term mindset with realistic expectations, and that includes embracing their unique accent and prioritizing clarity of meaning over some kind of vocal perfection. The goal is to think faster, not necessarily to sound different.
But confidence, I'd argue, grows organically through small, measurable wins, which our techniques provide immediately. When that anxiety starts, relying on psychological acceptance can feel too abstract, too passive for a learner who needs to see tangible progress. Competence-building exercises involve using what they know successfully. So when we encourage using simple sentences consistently, we're building momentum. We tell them, use 3 simple, correct sentences now instead of 1 complex, hesitant one later. This is practical competence. You see the success immediately. The brain registers that flow state, however brief it is. It's through this repetition of practical success that the internal critic is gradually silenced, not through philosophical acceptance alone. We're using competence to address the fear indirectly.
I have to disagree with your premise that competence must be demonstrated through these structured techniques before the psychological work can even begin. That can actually reinforce the need for constant performance. The psychological work is fundamentally about resource allocation. When a learner is constantly policing their grammar and vocabulary, perfectionism, 90% of their cognitive resources are dedicated to error checking and self-criticism. The first step, the true prerequisite, is telling that learner you have permission to stop checking the grammar. When they get that license to fail, they immediately free up those 90% of cognitive resources, and that allows them to focus entirely on meaning and speed. That is the moment thinking faster becomes possible. It's not about finding a filler word. It's about removing the internal judge, trick, or simply removing the weight that's causing the panic in the first place.
I think that's a false dichotomy. We shouldn't pit psychological permission against structural tools. But if we must prioritize one, the evidence suggests that action is the catalyst. The tools are what create the opportunities for success that make that internal permission feel safe. Without the structural techniques, the learner is just waiting for some confidence breakthrough that might never arrive. They need the engine of fluency, the active output methods, to drive the car forward. The psychological liberation acts as the transmission fluid, ensuring smooth shifting, but it is not the engine itself.
And I maintain that psychological liberation is the ignition key. Without the key, the engine, no matter how well designed it is inert.
So, to summarize my position, fluency demands consistent, practical action. The transformation from passive knowledge to active skill, it fundamentally relies on structured, active methods. Things like shadowing, chunking, and the deliberate creation of speaking opportunities to structurally override the inherent slowness of mental translation. These methods convert passive knowledge into demonstrable, high-speed skill. We have to focus on the measurable physical acts of speaking because consistency and action are the primary engines of progress. They provide the successful experiences that ultimately dismantle those internal psychological barriers.
And my summary remains that fluency is, well, it's fundamentally contingent on internal liberation. Until the psychological weight of fear, perfectionism, and that destructive cycle of grammar obsession is lifted through a mistake-friendly mindset and a genuine acceptance of imperfection, those active techniques will be misused, sabotaged, or just never attempted at all. The core requirement is mental reprogramming, and that's rooted in massive input that builds natural recognition and the conceptual clarity that permits error. The psychological scaffolding has to be securely in place before the technical building of speed and output can even begin effectively.
The material clearly shows that the journey from just understanding English to achieving genuine flow is a complex one. It encompasses both specific structural training methods and essential internal shifts.
Right. Understanding how these two approaches interact, the technical methods designed to increase speed and the psychological groundwork required to remove the internal brakes, that is crucial for any learner. It is a dual process, but we have to first ask ourselves which layer must be successfully addressed before the other can even begin to function. There is clearly much more to explore in how these components work together to achieve true cognitive flow.